And now, AM 650 presents your source for leading-edge news and information on today's hottest products and services. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.
Welcome to Key Pacific's Talk About Strata. I'm Stirling Fox, joined by Tony Gioventu, the Executive Director of the Condominium Homeowners Association of British Columbia, and also Vancouver Province and 24 Hours condo columnist. Welcome back, Tony. Good to see you again.
Well, good evening, Stirling. How are you this evening?
Well, I am very well, thanks, and it's a real treat to welcome another guest to the program again. Adrienne Murray is back with us from White Rock. Ms. Murray is a Strata lawyer and has been with us on this program before. It's very nice of you to join us again, and it's good to see you.
Thank you, Stirling. Thanks for having me back.
Well, it's our pleasure, and had a chance to have a coffee just before starting the program and talking with Adrienne about, well, what are the most common beefs that Strata lawyers get most frequently involved in? And you said they sort of break down into two general categories: alterations without approval and parking and storage issues. Those are the two big topic headings that see most Strata lawyers like yourself being very busy people.
Certainly there's lots of other issues that arise, but yeah, those are two biggies. And parking and storage, both from my practice as a lawyer, but also because I also teach realtors for the British Columbia Real Estate Association. And so I have to say, parking and storage questions and issues from listing realtors and selling realtors are big.
Tony, you and I have spent the last couple of editions of this program talking about the new rules that require Strata councils province-wide to file new paperwork effective just a few weeks ago, that they have until later this year to actually get going. But it's this whole deficiency or depreciation rather reporting now required, and I think we've done a pretty good job of covering off most of those issues. What sort of feedback are Strata council people giving you about these new requirements?
Well, I think that what people are finding is that they're going to be in a little bit of a time crunch if they don't start to look at whether they're going to actually have their depreciation report done by a depreciation planner, or whether they're going to exempt themselves, because the window for compliance closes next year in 2013, December 2013. So time will go by fast.
I already shortened the term by a year, which would instill a little panic in some of our listeners, I'm sure. Not appreciated, not very helpful on my part. So, folks, it's actually next year the deadline rolls by.
And they have a little bit more time even then if they don't do it. So Strata corporations do have some time to get this together. But you know, one of the things that you said about new filing obligations is one of the little trigger buttons that's happening is that there seem to be all these little urban myths that are arising around depreciation reports, misinterpretation of the legislation, and there actually is no filing requirement. But that's one of the myths that's traveling around, and I've actually seen that in a newspaper article where it says that Stratas now have to file depreciation reports. There's no filing requirement. They simply have to have a depreciation report commissioned, and it'll have to be commissioned and then updated on a 3-year cycle. What they do with it is it's part of the records and documents of the corporation, and if somebody comes along when they're buying, kind of like parking and storage lockers and the other things, when they're buying, they have to provide a copy of the information, the depreciation report with the information certificate.
So ultimately, and you, Adrienne, and Tony and I have discussed this already in your last appearance with us, the educated consumer is the better off person in every instance, and this whole business of new reporting requirements on the part of Strata councils ultimately could very much be to the benefit of new condo or Strata buyers who want the maximum amount of information prior to signing on the dotted line, right?
Absolutely. Education is the key, and one of the, I think, challenges for buyers thus far has been actually getting some substantive information about the state of the building. And it's fine to walk around the Strata lot and take a look at how many square feet and the color of the carpet and the view, but I'm buying into a building that requires repair or may have been repaired. Getting access to that information has always been extremely difficult. And so now this depreciation report, I think, is a game changer for buyers in Strata that will now provide them with access to significant information. And we're certainly talking about it a lot amongst the realtors these days as well.
Okay. Now, we try to answer at least one email from one of our listeners around British Columbia each and every program, and we're going to get at this week's email really early on because Doris Carter in North Vancouver has really summed up a lot of what this particular edition of the program is about. And here's her note to us. She says, I bought a unit in the fall that had 3 parking spaces included with it. They were listed as part of the sales agreement and identified it as spaces numbered 32, 33, and 34 down on P3. Well, Council recently advised me they are reallocating parking spaces to people who don't have them, and I will be losing the one space I do not use. Doris says, how can the Council take away a space that I bought? And that's a darn good question. So, Tony, you received Doris's email first and did a little basic checking on the nature of the deal or of Doris's situation. She's not the original owner of the Strata unit that she's bought, is she?
She's not, and we'll break this up a little bit. And she's the third purchaser, so she didn't buy from the developer. And so what people have to understand, I think, first is the nature of what these parking spaces and storage lockers look like. So are they common property, which means that they are the common use and allocation of the entire Strata Corporation, and they could be reallocated and reused based on the rules and the bylaws? Are they limited common property? And limited common property means that they are designated for the exclusive use of one or more owners.
Okay.
So these, take Doris, for example. If it said on the Strata plan on spaces 32, 33, and 34 that these are LCP for Strata Lot 109, maybe it was her unit, Strata Lot 109, then those could not be taken away from her if the developer created them as limited common property. Even the Strata Corporation sometimes at a later date may want to organize and make their parking more stable. Even they can create limited common property by passing resolutions and filing these in the Land Title Office. The third kind of designation is if it's actually part of the Strata lot. Parking spaces 32, 33, 34 could be part of Strata Lot 109, or they could even be separate Strata lots. So there's a number of variations of parking, and so when you're buying from a subsequent purchaser, so I think we'll get Adrienne to talk about the owner-developer relationship and what happens in that, because it can be a bit complicated in how those transfers and how those allocations of parking are created. But as a subsequent purchaser, you certainly want to establish with some real clarity from the Strata Corporation's records who really is responsible for controlling this parking and how is this parking allocated. But I think, Adrienne, you should comment really on the first purchaser. When you're the first purchaser, you go in from the developer, what are you buying?
Well, and the developer, the designations don't change. You're going to have either area that's designated as Strata lot, common property, or limited common property. And so developers may create limited common property, and when you negotiate with a developer and you want to buy a Strata lot and you want to have 2 parking spaces, it may be that the parking spaces are going to be designated as limited common property.
Okay, now let me interrupt you just to say that this would be you as the potential buyer talking to the developer of a brand new place.
Brand new building.
Okay.
It may or may not be constructed. It may still be in the pre-sale stage.
Okay.
But when I'm in discussions with the developer and I say I want 2 parking spaces, then the developer may well say, well, we'll give you a second parking space, we'll charge you X number of thousands of dollars. The most important question I have to ask is, what am I getting for my money? Is the developer going to designate this as limited common property, which means it's for the use of my Strata lot and it's permanently etched on the Strata plan? Or another practice that developers have used frequently is to lease the common property parking to itself or a related company. And the idea is it's the entire common property area. Let's say there's 3 levels of parking. They lease the entire common property area to themselves or a related company, and then as each buyer comes along and wants a parking space, they will sublease or assign a sublease of that parking space.
But to the buyer, that sounds like a sale, right?
Well,
I'll charge you 60 grand and you can have a spot, and for another 35 you can have a second spot. See what a great deal I'm giving you here?
and it does sound like a sale, and it actually works like a sale, because although I don't own the property, it's still common property. Common property is owned by everyone. I will have a long-term right to use it. I'm buying a sublease. Let's say the developer leased it for 199 years
Okay,
from the
sure.
Strata, then I'm buying that sublease for 199 years. So legally, I don't own it. I don't have a title to that parking space, but I will have the leasehold right to use it, to use that parking space for 199 years.
So I'm going to get some kind of document that
Yes.
indicates that this parking space or the one next to it as well are permanently mine based on this arrangement with this developer.
That's right. That's right. There will be some documentation if the developer has arranged a lease and sublease assignment.
Okay, now back to Doris's email. She didn't buy from the original owner, as Tony has already told us. She's the third owner, so she has bought from. It's a resale. So where did Doris go wrong? What did she not? Because she says right here they were listed as part of the sales agreement, Adrienne, and identified it as spaces number so and so on such and such a level. And so she asks, how can the council take away a space that I bought?
Well,
she thinks she bought it.
And you know, maybe she did, in terms of being able to use it. Because the next question we have to ask is, what was the arrangement with the first buyer and the developer?
Right.
Did the first buyer enter into a lease of these parking spaces? Because most of these leases contain a provision that say, when a buyer of a strata lot enters into a sublease of a parking space, and that buyer then sells their strata lot, the sublease is automatically assigned to the new buyer.
Owner. Okay, that makes sense.
So if we determine that the initial buyer entered into a lease with the developer, and when the initial buyer sold to the next buyer, then those parking spaces were assigned, and when Doris bought from the second buyer, those parking spaces would be assigned again. The question we need to know is, can the Strata take these parking spaces away? Or in order to answer that question, we need to know whether there was a lease in place.
Doris, thank you so much for your email. We have not begun to respond to it as thoroughly as I'm sure you're hoping we will. We need to take a quick break, and we'll get right back and tackle a little bit more. But it's a lot dicier than it appears to be on the surface of things. Strata lawyer Adrienne Murray from White Rock is our guest. Tony Gioventu, Executive Director of the Condominium Homeowners Association of British Columbia, and yours truly, Stirling Fox. This is Key Pacific's Talk About Strata, with more to come.
Delivering relevant and beneficial consumer information. This is Experts on Call, and there's more still ahead on AM 650.
Is this common